Mandre the Magician, September 3rd, 2019. The magician nicknamed Mandrake in the state of Kolkata, India. He made a plan to be thrown into the Ganges River inside a steel cage with his hands and feet tied to prepare for his performance. He had performed this trick 20 years ago and succeeded. Mandrake told his assistants to tie his hands and feet. His assistants tied his hands and feet and placed him in the cage. The cage was lowered into the middle of the water with the help of a crane. However, this time they failed to account for the river's current and the water's visibility. Mandrake was trying to untie his hands and feet under the water. Meanwhile, his assistants above did not know what was happening because they could not see beneath the surface of the water. Something went wrong for Mandrake. In the meantime, the cage was drifting away with the current. The time set for Mandrake had already run out. His assistants notified the necessary teams and a dive into the river was conducted. The cage was found 2 kilometers away hours later. However, Mandrake was already dead. The Keros brothers, March 15th, 1918, Hungary. One day before the performance, the 2 brothers entered the water-filled tank back-to-back to practice. The goal is simple: hold your breath, pick the lock, and get out. And that is exactly what they did. One day later, the 2 brothers stepped into the center of the arena for their performance, facing a massive crowd of spectators. The 2 of them entered the water-filled tank once again, and the lid was shut and locked over them. While the brothers were trying to pick the locks, their eyes began to burn. It prevented the brothers from seeing. Before the show, their teammates had accidentally set the chlorine level of the water too high. Because the brothers couldn't see anything, they started banging on the glass. But the audience, thinking the banging was part of the performance, began to applaud. Shortly after, both brothers drowned in the middle of the performance. Henry Cordoni, February 11th, 1911, Italy. Cordoni was well known for his performances featuring exotic snakes. One day, he was performing a trick where a king cobra emerging from a basket was hypnotized and transformed into a flower. That day, his assistants had warned him that the snake was ill-tempered. Drawing on his years of experience, Cordoni said that he would continue with the performance regardless. Cordoni reached his hand toward the basket in the middle of the stage. Suddenly, the snake lunged from the basket and bit Cordoni on the cheekbone. Cordoni collapsed to the ground. The venom spread rapidly through his body, paralyzing him. By the time they called for help, Cordoni had already turned blue. Shortly after, he passed away right then and there. Amazing Marco. May 4th, 1924, London, England. Marco appeared in the showroom for a performance he had prepared for many times. Marco put on the straitjacket with the help of his assistants, and his feet were tightly tied with rope. He was slowly pulled up by his feet using a mechanism. At exactly 10 meters high, the goal was very simple. He was going to remove the straitjacket while hanging by his feet. While Marco was trying to take off the jacket, the pulley inside the mechanism snapped, and Marco crashed onto the concrete floor from a height of 10 meters. The audience thought this was part of the show, but Marco passed away, gasping for his final breaths in front of the stage. Desh Bandu, October 27th, 1950, India. Bandu took the stage to perform his crazy show. When he reached the final part of the show, he was going to swallow 3 swords at once. He prepared the swords. He felt dizzy and lost his balance due to the extreme heat on stage. As his body convulsed, the swords pierced his esophagus and stabbed into his lungs. Bandu realized that something had gone wrong. He bowed to the audience without showing any sign of distress, and he went to the dressing room. While they were calling for help, Bandu collapsed and died of internal bleeding. Ralph Biales, September 14th, 1930, Germany, Berlin. Biales had performed the bullet-catching trick thousands of times. He claimed to catch the bullets with a special metal device attached to his teeth. He was going to perform the same trick again at a show one day. However, he had performed this trick so many times that the shock waves from the constant gunpowder explosions had caused brain damage. In the middle of the show, after catching the bullet, he suddenly collapsed on stage, and he died right there. Since there were no bullet marks anywhere on his body, his family became suspicious and requested an autopsy. Doctors discovered that these miniature explosions occurring over the years had caused microfractures in his skull and a brain hemorrhage. and they diagnosed that the explosion in his final performance was the final straw. Dr. Vivien Powell, November 22nd, 1920, London, England. Powell was a well-known figure of her time, famous for her chemistry-based magic tricks. He prepared a special mixture for his fire-eating man show. When the time for the performance arrived, he took to the stage with his mixture. He was just about to begin his performance. However, the heat generated by the stage lights caused the exposed gunpowder and chemical mixture on his table to explode. The explosion threw Powell directly off the stage and caused severe burns to her face. She passed away within a few hours at the hospital where she was taken, as the hot gases she inhaled had burned her lungs. Washington Irving Bishop, 19th of May, 1889, New York, USA. Mind-reading master Bishop suffered a sudden stroke and collapsed while performing at a dinner party. Everyone was watching him in astonishment. No one could tell whether the incident was real or just a part of the show. The note Bishop always carried in his pocket that read, "I am not dead, I am only in a trance," was not with him that night. He was rushed to the hospital. Doctors declared him dead. Despite all of his wife's objections, the doctors, driven by medical curiosity, opened his skull and began examining his brain only a few hours after his death. It was later revealed that Bishop was actually alive at that moment and died on the autopsy table while his skull was being cut. His wife was in shock. She held the doctors responsible, but Bishop was already dead. Shortly after, his body was laid to rest in his grave. Viven Hensley, the 8th of June, 1938, Brisbane, Australia. Hensley was not a professional, but an amateur illusionist. But he had mastered the razor swallowing trick after practicing it numerous times. In the trick, he would toss the razor blades into his mouth, but in reality, he was dropping them into a secret pocket in his sleeve. One day, before a performance, he wanted to perform the trick for his son at home as practice. He sat his son down in front of him, prepared his materials, and brought the razor blade toward his mouth. The razor blade slipped from his hand and went straight down his throat. Panicking, Hensley tried to remove the blade but pushed it even deeper in the process. He was rushed to the hospital after calling an ambulance. He passed away at the hospital due to internal bleeding followed by a severe infection. His final words before passing were a reflection of his regret over how foolish such a simple mistake had been.